Hello and welcome to SMPD, the podcast where we look back at the cartoons that shaped our childhood. I am Chris Bolton. With me, as always, my cartoon compadre, Mr. Mark Williams.
Hello.
And we are carrying on spooky season. For those of you that listen to our other shows on the network, you'll know we kicked off our spooky season this year with a look at Dracula Untold last week. So we're going to carry on the vampire theme and dive into something that I think is probably long overdue. It's time for us to look back at Count Duckula.
Yeah, no, I remember we talked about this when we first started doing this show, fucking 4 years ago, wherever it was, 5 years ago now. And this one's been on the list for a long time. We've sort of held it back. I'm not entirely sure why.
Me either.
But I mean, I remember as a kid, I absolutely loved this because I think this was probably my first introduction to vegetarianism.
I think it is for most of us. It's certainly why I eat broccoli, and broccoli, incidentally, is my favorite vegetable.
Yes,
and I wouldn't eat it were it not for Count Duckula.
Yeah, I'm the same. I don't know whether as I'd grown older I would have eaten it anyway, but certainly this was the way my parents kind of foisted it into my diet. Was that Duckula eats broccoli, so why don't you?
Yeah, I mean, but by that extent, it worked a lot better for broccoli than fucking Banana Man did for bananas, didn't it? I think.
Yeah, this is true. But I already ate bananas, so it was fine. But yeah, so I mean, I remember loving this as a kid, and then going back to it this week. Not watched as much as I would like, just because life. But what I have watched, I've thoroughly enjoyed, and for reasons I didn't remember. It's very different tonally to what I was expecting.
Now it's exactly the same tonally as I was expecting, and I have a very odd relationship with this show. I think I come to it from a very weird place. I'm probably on my own with this because I know this show is like super beloved by everybody, and I don't dislike it by any means. I've got a lot of love for Duckula, but I also don't quite get it. And I thought maybe in rewatching it, I might pick up on stuff that I didn't get as a kid, and I certainly have, but I'm still left. We'll talk about it as we go through, obviously, but not to bury the lead. I'm still left not quite getting it, and I don't know why. It must be me. Well, I do know why, and I do know it's me, clearly. But yeah, I don't dislike it by any stretch, and I've enjoyed what I've watched. Now I've not done as much as I would like either, just because with all the stuff we do for Halloween, there's a lot of prep that goes in as well. So I spent quite a lot of time this last week prepping our episode for next week and the artwork that goes with it. But I've still watched a good 5 or 6 of these, which is not as much as I normally do for any of our other shows either. But that felt like enough, if I'm honest, as well for me. And that's one of the things I think, when I say I don't quite get it, that's one of the things for me is the length of these episodes for what the show is.
Yeah.
They're very long, aren't they? They're
22 minutes.
Yeah, which I think if this was a more narrative driven show, I would be fine. But because it's gag led, I sort of feel like 22 minutes is like they're really scratching around for story by the end of the episode.
They do, especially when you consider a lot of the gags are repeated.
A lot of the gags. Now, it is extremely funny. It's very smart, very well written. I've laughed my box off with everyone. I mean, there's been at least one belly laugh in every episode that I've watched. It's very, very funny. As you would expect from the team behind Danger Mouse. It's Cosgrove Hall, it's David Jason. So you would expect it to be funny.
Yeah.
But I think whereas in Danger Mouse, there was a set structure that could be followed because it was essentially a secret agent show and there was evil to be thwarted every week. And yes, it went to some. I don't think we've ever actually done Danger Mouse on this show, have we?
No, we did it on Who Wins.
Yeah, I remember talking then about how it takes some really random turns in an episode. At times it felt like everybody on the writing staff at Danger Mouse was on fucking drugs, to be honest.
Probably it was. Yeah,
but that kind of worked. It still had a through line. Whereas with this, it feels like a collection of skits, of gags that are loosely hung together on a theme. And I found that grating for 20 odd minutes at a pop. Like I can only watch one at a time, whereas coming off the back of Gargoyles, where I just basically took the whole thing in one go. I was just like, give it all to me now. This was a bit of a come down, I suppose, as well. So maybe it hasn't been helped. Goggles has got a lot to answer for, as I talked about last week as well. Everything that's coming after it for the next month or so, has got
going to be a difficult sell.
Big fucking shoes to fill. But look, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer on this. I know this is a show that a lot of people love, and like I say, I don't dislike it by any stretch of the imagination. And I have very fond memories of it. It had a big cultural impact, and it had a big impact on my childhood. Like I said, I'm not joking. I eat broccoli because Duckula eats broccoli, and I feel like it's partly that I've always kind of given this show a pass because I want to like it, and I want it to be, for me, what it is for everybody else. And so I think I do kind of tend to look past a lot of the issues that I have with it, but that does mean it feels like hard work. And it did for me as a child as well. It was never a cartoon that I could be excited to watch, but yet it was one that I watched every week.
Yeah, so I had a slightly different relationship with this. I really enjoyed it as a kid. I haven't rewatched it since. I've not watched. Until we start doing watching and research for these episodes, I don't tend to rewatch. I don't have a massive amount of time, and I just don't have them available a lot of the time. So, incidentally, if people are wanting to go back to it, there is an actual proper YouTube channel.
Yes,
where they all are. So if you want to see them, go there. They are on that, and these people are getting paid for that. But yes, I've not gone back to these, and I came back to it. I think it was Sunday. Similar to you, I did balk at the length a little bit. Take that how you will. But so I put one on. I put one on, and it was a collection of 3 episodes, and that was like an hour. I'm thinking, fuck, that's going to be a long hour. But I got away with that, so I did that. I got through it, and that was okay. And then last night, so we're recording Tuesday, so Monday night, number 1 has gymnastics for an hour. So I was like, right, okay, fine, I'll take my iPad, I'll sit in the car, because we're not allowed in anymore. We can't go sit in the coffee shop anymore. We've got to sit and wait outside or go away. So I sat in the car with my iPad, and I was watching it. And it was a very funny episode. I laughed a lot. It was as slapstick and as surreal and as stupid as you'd expect. But I got to the end of that when I thought, right, there's another 40 minutes of this video on YouTube. Do I want to sit through another 2 of them? I've still got 40 minutes, and the answer was it wasn't a resounding no, but it was very much like that was a slog.
Yeah,
and some episodes are better than others as well. Don't get me wrong.
Definitely,
they do seem to improve as they go through. I mean, I watched the first 2 or 3, and I picked a couple of random from later seasons, and they did seem to be a little bit slicker.
I did the same thing. I tried to watch a selection. I also have a collection of these episodes on DVD as well. It's not a Duckula DVD. It's one of the Cult Kids range, which has a lot of the Thames TV shows. A couple of episodes from each one all slung together on a DVD. So I've had some, it's a good way to watch them that have been pre-selected for me as a kind of best of, if you like, rather than me having to go into YouTube and go, oh, well, I like the title of that one, or I should definitely watch the pilot, and so on and so forth. Not that there actually is a pilot, by the way.
No, there's not. The pilot is the opening narration. That's it. That's all you ever get.
Yeah, which I'm a big fan of anyway. I've mentioned that in the show before. I love an opening narration where we get all of our exposition up front and stuff. And
and it's quite interesting actually, because the whole bit where where they talk, where you got Barry Clayton talking through the sort of the lore of it all, and then the bit where he goes in blood, I'll get it. When I'm at my parents' house, me and my brother will still do that. Somebody asks for something, we go, I'll get it, and off we go. Because it's just something that we grew up with and we've been doing for the last 30 fucking years. It's stupid and it's annoying.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, because I do the same thing. Like, and it's not just I'll get it, but I do. I'll get it. Like, if the door goes, it's the first thing that comes to my mind. I cannot say I'll get it without going, oh, he'll get it. I can't do it. But it's not just that. It's also, even just talking about the show. There is a call and repeat response immediately, where if somebody says Duckula, I immediately go, Count Duckula. This show has definitely ingrained itself, whether it was one that really spoke to me and I loved or not. Like, there is definitely that about it. It has definitely ingrained itself. So but a big part of it for me, I think, is that, like, you get that opening and it does so much to build atmosphere. And even then the opening kind of few seconds of an episode as well, they are really dark. They are, like, ridiculously dark. It's very.
You've got Barry Clayton doing the sort of Vincent Price voice as well. That really comes off really well.
It really does. And then obviously it's aimed. I mean, you can't say it's aimed at a younger audience. There is some adult humor in here.
Yeah,
It is more of a family show, but obviously it has to pitch towards the CITV crowd. So it was never going to be like this horror show.
yeah,
But then I feel like that, like as soon as we're out of the opening, the show is something else. It's almost like we drop all of that and becomes this silly knockabout gag fest.
yeah,
Whereas perhaps it could have sort of lent a little bit heavier into maybe the Scooby Doo of it all, and just be, because that is definitely there in the opening, and it's
yeah,
definitely there at the end. And like this is probably saying more about me as a kid, but those end credits for some reason terrified me, with
yeah,
all the like the skeletons and the clips from old movies and stuff like that. I was really frightened of those end credits. So
mm,
it had that about it, but just the stuff in the middle, I feel like they could have struck more balance between the kind of
yeah.
the spookiness of it all then,
Yeah,
and
that's
the
what I was saying
silly
earlier. I mean,
comedy.
talking about the tone that I wasn't expecting. I mean, I remembered the Barry Clayton opens, with closing,
Mm.
good night out there, wherever you are, sort of thing. But then when you get into it, it feels more like a Munsters
Yes.
or an Adams Family where they're playing for laughs, and it just so happens to be that he's a vampire, and that's really irrelevant.
Yeah,
It
and
doesn't really matter a whole lot. Whereas the way it's sold is, he's the latest in a long line of vampires. They're all vicious killing machines. All the other vampires you meet are all fucking sadistic and vicious and all the rest of it. And then he's the odd one out. But they never play on that.
no, and that's the bit that's missing for me. It was definitely missing as a child, but I didn't realize what it was then. I
Hmm.
just knew that there was something, because remember, like for all I've said, the end credits scared me, as I've spoken about at length on this show. I was that weird kid. All right, I was your Wednesday Addams. I loved
Hmm.
monster movies. I loved horror. I loved all of it. So this was playing right into my ballpark.
Hmm.
And so I think the fact then that it wasn't actually about the fact that he's a vegetarian vampire duck, and that's the real crime of this, is that's such a
Yeah.
great
Yeah,
concept.
it's such a good hook, isn't it? I mean, and you
Yeah.
look at stuff that's come since, and not in the sort of the cartoon genre or the kids genre, but you look at some of the vampire stuff that's come since. There's, the whole tortured brooding, don't eat people,
Mm.
no, all this sort of stuff. That that really stems from things like this and Quackula,
Yeah.
from the
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
70s. And yeah, it just doesn't really go anywhere. And you
Um,
could the thing I think with this is that whereas Igor is very well placed,
mhm.
as an evil sidekick,
Yeah.
almost as a sort of a bit of a stooge, a bit of a minion. Nanny and Duckula are completely out of place,
Totally.
and then
And
everybody else,
yeah.
they could be in anything. So where you've got Gaston and Pierre became Victor and Hugo, so
Yes.
that's there straight away. You've got the four Ravens, the brothers. I can't remember what they were called. But again, they don't feel like they belong in anything monstrous. They should be in something like a Victor and Hugo, which is no more crime based.
Mm.
And you
And
can
and again, you've
transplant
got
most of these characters out.
somewhere else. Yeah, and again, then you've got Von Goosewing, who again,
Yeah,
like, yes, he's a bit silly, but you can see how he also fits in with Igor.
yeah,
And yeah, you're right. Like Declan and Nanny feel like they belong in a different show. Now, that's not, as I say, it's not necessarily a criticism. I don't want to be hard on it, because it is what it is.
hmm,
And actually, I think particularly Nanny is the great triumph of this show. Like, she has all the best lines.
yeah,
She has all the best moments, and she's really well played. Like, whereas Duckula, I actually find, especially now as an adult, I find him quite grating, if I'm honest.
yes,
Igor's very dry, so he has a lot to do as well. But most of the time, I said there were numerous belly laughs throughout. Most of them came from Nanny and her
yeah.
kind of sort of bodged wordplay and not quite understanding what's going on, and just the constant running gag of her not understanding what a door is
Yeah.
incredibly funny. Like, it's
But
it's
and I mean,
stupid, but
even
it's
if you watch
incredibly
you
funny.
watch the pilot and she knocks and she crashes through the wall,
Yeah.
and they make a joke where they say, "Oh no, why don't you use the door?" And you know straight away she's going to go and bash through the door,
Yeah.
but it doesn't stop it being funny when she does.
No, and there is some great comedy timing. That pilot episode actually has got what I think is the funniest moment that I've watched so far, and I'll come on to that when we no doubt talk about the writing as well. But yeah, it's a real shame that they got as far as sort of blowing this character up out of Danger Mouse for, like, yeah, he was a vampire duck, and like, yeah, all right, we've seen that in DuckTales as well. Like, there's
Yeah,
nothing, or we've seen similar. I mean, Magica's more of a witch, but that same kind of sort of thing you've seen in DuckTales as well. But to blow that up then and to take it to the next level of, like, well, actually, he's not that Duckula though. He's another in a line of Duckulas, and this one's a vegetarian. And
yeah,
then to take that even further of, like, why is he a vegetarian? Oh, because Nanny picked up ketchup instead of blood. And all of the thought has gone into it, and it's the central concept of the show. and it's never used.
Yeah.
Like other than Igor every week trying to get him to do something evil, which again is really just lip service, because every week it'll be a line off Igor of like, yes, well, maybe if we go to this country, then he'll meet so and so and they'll teach him to be evil, and that's
I mean,
it.
I
Like
think they
there's no
do.
actual plot
No, I
from
mean
Igor, you know.
in the second episode, I think it is, before they go to meet Don Diego in Spain. No, it's winter, it's raining, it's cold, and they want to go somewhere warm because obviously vampires like the sun.
Oh, we'll get onto that, believe me.
Yeah. So you get that, but straight away, Igor gives him a drink, and very clearly it's dark red. He drinks it. It has a bit of a spastic episode, or whatever the correct term is now. But he starts
It's definitely not spastic, I can tell you.
Yeah, but I mean, he starts shaking and sort of and convulsing and sort of bouncing around the room and making silly noises and all the rest of it. And it's very clear that he's given him blood instead of carrot juice, and he's called him out on it. But even if there was some sort of reason for that, other than just, look, you're a vampire duck, you're supposed to be drinking blood. If it's a case of, look, if we give him blood, he's going to turn, or he will turn for a short period of time until it's out of his system, or just something to make it a bit more tangible.
Yeah, or even if it's just, Igor is the way he is and he's used to being a servant to vicious vampires and he's inherently evil, that's fine, I can go with that. And even if it is that he needs to turn Duckula and he wants to, then that's fine, but then make him the villain, because it doesn't fit as it is with him being sort of the faithful manservant.
Yes.
But then also just constantly trying to make Duckula something that he's not. And part of the issue there as well is I don't really understand who Duckula is as a character either.
No.
I don't know what the purpose of him is, because like some episodes he's an absolute arsehole, just a self-important, arrogant twat. And then other episodes he's like this benevolent count who looks after people and he's all about peace and love, and he's a vegetarian.
They kind of try and set him up as that he's this sort of wannabe famous rock star without the music sort of entity. But they don't do enough
doesn't
with
come
that
from anywhere, does it? No.
And that doesn't. There's no payoff to it at any point.
No, and that's the thing. Like, I know I shouldn't compare it, but it's the obvious comparison because it's the same team essentially in the same studio. But if you look at Danger Mouse, you have that hook of like, yes, he's the world's greatest secret agent. So the fact that he's an arrogant twat makes sense. Danger Mouse's character makes sense, and then the fact that actually he's also dumb as a fucking post also makes sense, because that's the antithesis of that, and that's why it's funny. Whereas in this, that's what we're missing, is that central hook, and it's actually there. Like somebody came up with it, the fact that he is a vegetarian vampire. Like it's there, the central concept is there, and then instead of that, we just go on these weird random globe-trotting adventures that really, and this is where I am going to come down on the show, really are just an excuse for some incredibly xenophobic accents and gags. Oh my God.
Yes.
Like I know we've said on the show before, like, look, product of its time and all of that, all right, and this isn't me trying to cancel Duckula, so don't come for me, internet, all right, but even so, even by fucking 80s standards, some of these accents are disgraceful.
But I mean, even Brian Truman's Nanny, that you look at that and you think that wouldn't have flown in the 90s, let alone now.
No. I can't, this is double standards, but that West Country accent is always funny, isn't it?
It is, and like I spent, as you know, I spent a lot of my career working in that part of the world, so I know that all right, you mean babber, that sort of that really bad, really thick West Country accent is something that I always look at fondly. But again, you look at it and think, well, it's obviously it's convenient. They've got Brian Truman there. He's part of the team, so fuck it, let's just give him a voice to do, and he can do Nanny.
Yeah.
But there's no reason why that had to be done by a bloke doing a really bad impression of a woman.
No, but it's funnier for it.
It is funnier for him, and that's the thing. As you said, there's a very clear double standard on our part there. I appreciate that. Whereas you get Gaston Pierre going yo yo yo, and it's like, hang on, you can't fucking do that.
Are they Chinese?
I don't know, some fucking thing. I've got a cold. I can't do voices. But yeah, so I mean, it's that it's that sort of thing. We think, well, hang on, was that necessary? And I'd say product of its time. That's the way they did shit.
Yeah. No, look,
and it's
Look, it was the 80s, and quite frankly, you could get away with this shit, so they did. And I don't know, if they were accurate, then they would have been a lot more expensive and probably less funny. Like, caricatures are funny, but they can
Yes.
also be offensive.
Yeah.
And a lot of that then comes down to the characterization within as well. It's not just the accent; it's the way these people are
Yes.
depicted.
I mean,
You mentioned the Spanish episode earlier,
yeah.
like when they go there and everybody's basically a gringo,
Yeah.
and you just, oh, come on, this wasn't right even then. Like,
Yeah.
let
That's
alone
right. And
now.
that's only,
You
you
know,
get the French characters. You get, I think, I can't remember. There was one. I'm trying to remember which episode it was, but there was one. I think they end up in somewhere. They end up in Britain, and even their British accents are offensive, which is quite an achievement.
it is, and I mean, even like when you look at some of the main characters, you look at Van Goospling, for instance, and again, like that cod German that he's using, and you're like, come on, it's like, we can do better than this.
Yeah.
Really, we can. And while we're on the subject of accents as well, and this is something I never clocked as a kid, what the fuck's up with David Jason? Because that's a choice. Like,
Yeah.
that accent is a choice.
But I think, I mean, to be fair to David Jason, I mean, I don't necessarily like it as a choice, but when he did a great deal to try and to sort of separate himself, because at this point everybody knew him as Del Boy. He went on to he went on to Danger Mouse. He went on to do this. He went on to do Wind in the Willows, and every job he took, he made those conscious choices to be a different, to bring each character its own voice.
Yeah, I
This
mean,
particular voice I don't like, but
no,
it's very much a definitive article. It's very much, this is what Duckula sounds like, and that's what I'm going with.
I think this is how I explained it to myself earlier, because I was thinking about this a lot earlier, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. Is not so much the Del Boy of it all, because Del Boy's a bit more Cockney wide boy, and Danger Mouse is very well spoken. But it's not even just in the voice; it's in the character and the mannerisms as well. Like, Duckula without that accent is a gnat's pube away from Mr. Toad. Like,
Yeah, true.
he's that kind of self-absorbed, eccentric wannabe count, essentially, rather than the Lord of Toad Hall or whatever. But you can very much see him just giving it a bit of poop and jumping in his car. He's very, very, very close to Mr. Toad. And so obviously,
Yeah, that's true.
maybe the separation needed to come there. But then I don't understand why he butchered an American accent, and not even like, it almost feels like he tried to go regional American as well, because at times
Yeah,
he does sound very New York.
yeah,
um and then like, he sometimes he almost gets away with it until he has to pronounce something with the letter R, and then
yes,
he just absolutely butchers it. And
yeah. It
it
all
pulls
falls
me
apart
straight
there.
out. It's really,
Yeah,
really bad. It's Dick Van Dyke's British level bad.
it is. And the other thing that bugged me with the performance from David Jason is that obviously it's something that they've done as, again, it's a character choice, but that little at the end of every sentence where there's every time he sort of makes a half gag, he sort of snickers at himself,
Yes,
and
and
it's
that
just,
is a character choice,
it's like
definitely.
this
Yeah.
really sort of self-satisfied thing. I know, I just don't like that. It just
And
it
that's the thing.
grates.
He is a smug arsehole of a character. I really, really dislike him as a character. Having
To be
rewatched
honest,
it,
I
really dislike him.
of the whole show, and so I've no, I have not watched this since I was a kid until this weekend. Um, of all the characters in it, I think I like him the least.
Oh, unquestionably, he really does great, and a big part of that's the accent, as you say. It's also the character himself and the mannerisms. But the bit that I just cannot reconcile, like I said, I could see wanting to distance himself from his other performances and stuff like that. The bit I cannot reconcile is why American. They're in
No,
Transylvania.
well, I was going to say,
What?
do some. No, if you're going to butcher anything, butcher an Eastern European accent, because at least then we're still in the Cold War. You can poke fun at the commies at the same time.
Yeah, and look, like, it's not like they care about how bad these accents are. It's not
No,
like they care about being offensive. So go with full on, I want to drink your blood. Just
yeah,
just do it. Like, just that. And then
yeah.
it's funnier that he's a vegetarian as well.
Hmm.
I mean, maybe he couldn't do that accent. I don't know. But he can't do an American accent either. So what's the diff?
Well,
Like,
yeah. I mean, it's a strange one, isn't it? But yeah, I
it
mean,
certainly doesn't help. Put it like that. It
yeah,
hinders more than it helps.
yeah, and I think that's true of a lot of the sort of the recurring characters. The way you've got the Crow brothers. Why can't I remember their fucking names? But like, no, there's some very definite choices have gone there as well. Well, they're called the Crow brothers. Duh. Um, but yeah, like, they've got this very sort of it's like a sort of army British parody
Yeah.
where they have like the sergeant major at the front, almost as if you think of Shoe People and the
Yeah.
sergeant
Yeah.
major in
Yeah. Yeah.
that. the leader of them is a bit like that, and then the others are all a bit like thick. No, they're all thick as shit, but they have a similar sort of parlance to them. The pirates, the penguins again. It's like there are very definite choices have gone into that, and I just don't think that. I don't think that when those choices were made, anybody was really thinking about what they would come out like.
Oh, unquestionably, they weren't. They were just look. They were funny to people at the time, and they're not unfunny now. It's just that we're
Yeah.
more culturally aware of these things. And like I say, this is by no means me trying to cancel Duckula. We have to meet these things on their own terms.
Yeah.
They are a product of their time, okay? And we wouldn't do it now. We would be smarter. But it doesn't make it any easier to watch.
No, it doesn't.
So
And I mean that's a big part of it. But I mean even in the performances, that some of them just don't match up with the characters. You know, the let's say the crows, they don't sound like they look. But
yeah, yeah, I know
their
what you mean.
their voices should no, they don't look as though those voices belong to. They should be lighter, area, a bit more common, a little less well pronounced, and a little less well spoken. And there are things like that which, yes, I get are difficult to write. Especially if I mean, I tend when I write, I tend to write for almost middle-aged white men because hi, that's what I am. And that's a lot easier. So I know I can do other stuff, but it just takes a lot more effort. So my default position is people sort of my age, sort of my background, sort of my class level, and I kind of go with that because that's just easy. I can embrace it. And I can do that quicker. Whereas what some of these, especially the penguins and the crows, they would benefit from having a different writer where somebody goes, actually, that's not how people talk. And unless you are in some sort of class structure in Eastern Europe, that's not how people talk. Those aren't the words they use. That's not the way they pronounce certain things. And that's one of the things I think has been missed in the performances. Is actually there's not, for all the variety of characters you've got, there's not that much variety of performance.
No, there really isn't. And that comes down again to time and place. It is just quite simply very, very, very British. Just like Danger Mouse was as well. All of that humor and all of that writing is very silly. And, it is bordering on toilet humor. It never gets to gross out level or anything like that. But, at times it borders on just blunt toilet humor. At times we tip over into slapstick, especially with Nanny. There's lots of punnery. It's just very, very silly. And I mentioned the first episode earlier on. There is a skit in that which, I mean, in terms of just writing a skit, is as good as anything you'd see on a mainstream sketch show of the era. And it went from starting off really annoying me to actually bringing me all the way around because of all the work that they put in. There's the first episode they're in Egypt and they're looking for this sax.
Yeah, it's evil sax.
Yeah. It's incidentally the plot of the game as well, which blew my mind because I can remember the game really well. It was shit, but it was one of the few Spectrum games I could complete because it took about 4 minutes.
It was so really easy. We had it as well.
It was like, and I'm not even joking. You could do it in like 4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah, it took long. It took longer to load than it did.
It did. Yeah, you literally had to run around, pick a couple of keys up, pretty much, and that was it. Like you could just jump over all the enemies. You didn't have to kill anything. It was anyway. Sidetrack. So it starts off. There's this whole wordplay with like Duckula waking up and these Egyptians finding him, and there's a whole thing. One of them's called whom might, and the other one's you be. And there's a whole thing of whom might you be, and that started to really grate on me. But then the gags started to build, and it built and built and built to the point of absolute absurdity, to the type of thing that you would get on British TV sketch. It's the type of thing the two Ronnies would get away with, just getting so ridiculous and so absurd and pushing it so far that you're just laughing at them as much as you're laughing with them.
Well, that's it. I mean, I remember sort of sitting there and watching that one. It's the Who's on First gag. Which, I mean, that's it's been going on. I mean, that's been around since the 30s. Fuck me, that's nearly 100 years ago. Shit. But I mean, it's a classic joke. It's been done so many times in so many different ways, but the joke is the same. It's wordplay around the name. But when you get to the point where you've got Duckula explaining to them what's going on at 90 mile an hour, and at the end they still go, and who might you be?
But it's not even that. Like it had me rocking by the end of that. But then they double down on it when they bring it. It was the Pharaoh gag at the end that it just absolutely floored me. Like I had to pause the video because I was laughing so much when the Pharaoh is called Ra, and so then with the wordplay we get into who Ra, who might you be? Who Ra? And then like they're talking about the Pharaoh rises, and they managed to go through hoorah, up she rises,
Yeah.
and then burst into a sea
Yes.
shanty. It's all like it took them like 2 minutes to get there, but they took us on that journey
Yeah.
all the way. And it just got more and more absurd and ridiculous. And I was like, you know what, hats off, because that is one of the cleverest pieces of writing and some of the best performances I've seen in, I think, any show that we've
Yeah.
done. Like that was a stretch, especially from something that, like you say, is a very old, tried and tested gag, to the point where when it started, I kind of rolled my eyes a bit and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, for fuck's sake, I don't want to put up with this for the next couple of minutes. But it's almost like the Aristocats, isn't it? It's not.
Yeah.
It's not about the joke itself. It's
The
in the
journey.
telling. Yeah, and they absolutely. It was hilarious. And so when I say that I sort of don't like how disjointed it is, and I don't like Duckula as a character, like for all of that, I don't like the rapping. Some of the content is absolute gold, and there's no other way to color it. Like, it is absolutely, when it's firing on all cylinders, some of those gags are absolutely hilarious. And I can't help but feel that, like, if these episodes, if they had 22 minutes to fill, right, if that's what the order was, they'd have been better served doing the more traditional thing that we had with lighter sort of comedy cartoons and your sort of animated sitcoms of this era, of having like 2 10-minute episodes, with an interstitial perhaps.
Yeah.
Or other than
And again,
that,
they
they just
build the
make them
interstitials
shorter.
into them. You've got
They
the
do. Yeah,
the
you've
backs
got
in the
the
clock.
clocks. Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
Yeah,
I mean
so
they do that, and I think you're right. And I remember thinking that yesterday when I was watching it. Is that had they done that? I mean, there's a lot of filler and a lot of fat in these episodes.
mm,
And I mean, they could be a lot leaner, they could be a lot slicker, and they could be a lot smarter for it as well. I think that they rely so much on repeating and repeating and repeating the same gags that they could get away with, as you said, they could probably drop them down to 12 minutes quite comfortably, and not lose the heart and the content of the episode. Yes, okay, you lose some jokes, but
mm.
you don't lose the feel of it.
Yeah, and I think that is part of the issue as well, is that even what slight story that we have within the 22 minutes does quite often get shoved in the back seat for
Yeah,
something like that routine we just talked about, which has very little to do with the actual story. It just so happens that they can place it within the context of being in Egypt. And so
yeah,
that'll go on for a couple of minutes while the actual story just takes a back seat. And that happens in almost every episode. Like,
yeah,
there will be a setup for a story. They'll get them to the location. We'll do fuck all with the story then for about 10 minutes. And then
yeah,
just before the end, we'll start to bring everything back in and wrap it up. And look, yes, I know it's a cartoon. Yes, I know it's for a family audience, and primarily they have to pitch it at kids as well. But that doesn't mean that you can be so lackadaisical with a narrative, because that's then when I'm watching it going, and even as a kid, like I say, this isn't something that Chris the adult is watching. There was something about this show that I wanted to love as a kid and never quite stuck with me. And I think it was this. I think it was that I was probably getting bored is the
mm,
problem. And I certainly have been now.
yeah,
And so you tune out for a bit, and then those gags come along, and you tune back in for a couple of minutes, but then you tune out again, and then you tune back in again, and it's very patchy, I
yeah.
think, is the problem.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I came to this. I came to this, and I remember this show very fondly, and I remember as a kid absolutely loving it, not really knowing why. It was just one of those. And as I've watched it, so as some of the gags really land. There's some really good slapstick, some really good puns, some really good wordplay. There's some borderline smut as well, which I'm always a fan of that, especially in kids shows, because it's
Mm.
always great to see people pushing the envelope, see how much they can get away with. Um, but I watched 3 or 4 of these on Sunday, a couple more yesterday, and I was sitting there thinking, why hasn't this finished yet?
Yeah.
And that's not a place I want to be, because I can see what they need to do. It hasn't finished because they haven't wrapped the episode up. They haven't finished the story yet, but they could have by now. Why haven't they? Why are they still doing this shit? Why have we got the crows falling off the grappling hook off the window 4 times and then making a joke about Nanny's cooking?
Mm.
Why do we have that 4 times in the space of 8 minutes?
Yeah.
It's that type of thing, and you think, right, okay, you could make this so much tighter and so much more enjoyable, and not have the lags and the lulls, because, as you said, as a kid, I didn't notice them so much because I'd have been playing or doing something else anyway. But sitting there, no, sitting as an adult watching it now, I try very much when we're watching stuff for these shows, unless it's something I know quite well, in which case I'll have the PlayStation on, or I'll be reading at the same time, or I'll be doing something. But if it's stuff I'm not that familiar with, or I haven't seen from them, I will sit there and give it my undivided attention.
Mm.
And I just found myself picking my phone up and going, oh, I just need to do that email. I just need to check this. I just need to check that. And that's not something that it's not something I want to be doing when I'm watching these shows back, because I want to give them my full attention. I want to do them justice. But at the same time, if they can't hold my attention, and I'm watching it because I need to, it's not really going to carry that much weight going forward. I mean,
Yeah.
I put one on earlier just to see what the kids thought of it, and another one was bored out of her mind, because it's not reading and that sort of thing at the moment. She just likes to read all the time, so great. All credit to her. Carry on. Number two watched it for a couple of minutes and he was laughing at the gags, but then he got bored. And this is a 7-year-old boy who likes dick and fart jokes.
It's me, basically. It's me.
I hate to tell you, mate, you're not 7.
Well, no, but I was when I was watching this.
Yeah.
What was it? 88, 89, probably this was out, so I probably was 7 or 8. Yeah. There you go. So I was 7. So
yeah. So, but I mean, that's the thing. It's like even he who will sit in front of a screen, if the fucking test card was on, he'd be glued to it. And within a couple of minutes, he's like, "Can I do something else now?" And so, I've not got a gun to your head. I'm not making you watch it. I just want to know what you think of it. Yeah. And the fact that you're bored after 5 minutes tells me a lot.
And it's a shame, isn't it? Because I think if it was shorter, I think if there were 5-10 minute episodes, I think, like, I'm not, as I say, I don't want to be harsh to it now. I don't think it's bad at all in any way, shape or form. But I feel like if there were 5-10 minute episodes, I would just be calling this one of the best shows ever. I think, as you say, if you could cut the fat and stick with it, and even if then you want to do rapid fire gags, if you just want to machine gun gags at me in the space of 10 minutes, I'm not going to be concerned about the long line of vampire ducks and why Duckula is you just can be and that would work. Whereas because it's 22 minutes and because it's stretched out over a couple of seasons as well, look, I'm not asking for some huge fucking story arc. What I do want to see is just call back to the fact that he is a vegetarian vampire duck. Those 3 things are intrinsic to his character and they need to be in the plot. We need to have plot revolving around the fact he's a vegetarian vampire and the fact also he's a duck. Like he's not a human, he's a duck. So there's that to it as well.
There is, and I think the fact that he was taken from Danger Mouse and then Victor and Hugo were taken from Gaston Pierre here, that him being a duck is a choice because he doesn't need to be.
No,
he could have been a gopher, he could have been a person, he could have been a badger, he could have been a pterodactyl. It wouldn't have mattered. The principle is the same: is that he's a vegetarian vampire. But they don't explore that. They don't explore the duck thing, and they don't even go down the route. If you look at something like Darkwing Duck, everything was duck puns.
Yes,
where are the duck puns in here?
Well, there are some.
There's some, but they're not anywhere near as frequent as they should be. I'm not
always sure they're intentional. I've come to the conclusion that they are, and that the writing and the performance is so smart. And this is the conclusion I've come to, right? Because it's either this or they are just accidental, but there are quite a lot of them. But what they don't do when they drop a pun, and especially the duck puns, is they don't give a sly nudge, nudge, wink, wink to camera. They just steamroll through them. And I've got a lot of time for that as a delivery of puns. I like that a lot. If you can deadpan your way through a pun and it makes it all the more funny. Because, I'm playing catch up with you then. And, 10 seconds later, I'm going, hang on a minute. Did they just... And I find that much funnier, and it's even... It's right in the opening. They start with it right in the opening where they talk about the legacy of foul vampires.
Yeah.
They're not foul, F-O-U-L. They're foul, F-O-W-L. But
and
they
that
just wrap that up into the
narrative.
narrative.
That was my problem, is that there are quite a few. I said there are a few of those, but then you come to expect that, and then they're noticeable in their absence in a lot of places. You're thinking, hang on, they've missed an opportunity there. And again, that may be the way my brain works, but I'm thinking, hang on, why have they done that? I'd have done that instead. Why have they said that? Why have they not put that really easy fucking gag in there?
Yeah, and I feel
and that's the thing I feel it's missing.
Yeah, and I feel like it's unfair to criticize them for what they kind of don't put in that they could, when they clearly they aren't going for that. That's the thing. It's not like, sometimes we watch stuff, and especially over on Mario, but we do it on this show as well. Sometimes we watch stuff and we like this. We did it just last week a lot when we were talking about Dracula Untold. And we're like, well, if this is the product you're trying to make, why aren't you doing this? Because this is how you tell this story and this is what's missing. But I think that the core issue here I'm talking about this like I dislike it when I say the core issue, but it's not that. But at the core, what it is all of those things fit in the show that we want it to be. But it's not a show that they've got any intention of making. I don't think they just intend to make this knockabout, silly gag fest. And it almost feels like they just needed a character to hang it on, and they went, "Oh, we'll get that one from Danger Mouse, and let's make him a vegetarian. That's funny. He's a vegetarian vampire. That's funny." And maybe they had one gag to do with it, and going, "Oh, fuck, we're stuck with this now. Never mind. Don't worry about it."
Down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, because actually his character, you're right. Actually, his character is that he's this kind of wannabe rock star. Which, okay, fine, make a show about that then. He doesn't have to be a vegetarian vampire duck in that case, does he?
No, exactly. He could be anything, and that's the thing, is that it's. I think you're right. I think it's probably unfair to criticize them for what's not in the show, and stuff that we'd want or we'd expect in it. But it just seems that there's a lot of squandered potential where they've gone, right, we've given you something, but we don't know how to pay it off. So rather than try and fail, we'll just kind of ignore it. So I mean, I think you get more about him being vegetarian in the credits, where you get that fucking monster carrot trying to eat him, than you get in the entire show.
And here's where it really stings every episode as well, is that the opening and closing are definitely geared towards the whole vampire of it all. It's all very gothic horror, and then the end credits, especially, say they used to scare me. Like, they're taking clips from old horror films, and they've got that kind of almost thriller kind of vibe running through them in the music as well. Legend has it, by the way, that Michael Jackson is in those credits, and I swear I'm not making that up. I remember talking about this in school.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
I can't remember where he is, but I remember somebody telling me, and everybody going, "Fuck off."
To be fair, that would have been my response as well.
Look, if anybody out there heard that in school, if any of you know this, listeners, get in touch with us, because I swear to God, there was a rumor going around that Michael Jackson was in the credits of Duckula, right? And I'm not making this up. I swear to God.
And if they've got footage of other stuff and they're overlaying stuff, they may well have snuck it in somewhere.
I think that's what it was. I think somebody was saying like it's a like a news clipping of him or something, and he's in one of those cutouts, isn't it? But there's all of these sort of people screaming and stuff like that, and then you got the skeleton with a head going around, and it's all quite creepy.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned the Munsters and the Addams Family earlier on, and I think even they pull that tone off better than this, because yes, they're silly, but they are also slightly spooky, scary, and they do lean into the oddness of it at times, whereas this just doesn't at all, apart from the opening. And especially, like you say, when you get the Vincent Price style narration, especially when you get "Good night out there, whoever you are," it sounds sinister as hell. Like, and it's so at odds with what you get in the middle.
And that's the thing, and I think I mean, thinking of particularly Addams Family. Munsters were a bit more family friendly again, but the Addams Family, the TV show from the 60s, that was very family friendly. But at least the fact that you had monsters, you had oddities, like you had Lurch, you had Cousin It, Uncle Fester was clearly some sort of fucking escaped convict lunatic thing. All of these things, they never explicitly told you what they were, but they played into them. Whereas here, you come to Scotland and you meet Muckquackula, or Muckduckula, sorry, and it's like, okay, well, this is just a fucking family mess.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter that they're a line of vampires. You're just meeting different stereotypes from different countries.
That's exactly what every episode felt like to me. Was we're either going to go to a different country or a different time period.
Yeah.
And all of the humor is going to be based around the stereotypes associated with that.
Yeah.
And again, look, in the 80s, that was fine. That's who we were as a nation. We were incredibly xenophobic. Yeah. And it's fine. That's what it was. And like I say, the writing's smart enough that it carries it, and I can look at it as a product of its time. But if that's the show you want to make, he doesn't have to be a vegetarian vampire duck. Like, it could be Bill and Ted. Do you know what I mean? Like, it could be anything. He just needs an excuse, and it feels like the whole thing's built then around, oh well, the castle can move, right? Well, so can a TARDIS, so can Bill and Ted's phone box, so can a DeLorean. That was the comparison I was about to make. Is that you could make this Doctor Who? Yeah,
you go to a different, as opposed to go to different countries, you go to different planets or different time periods, And yes, okay, what no, you might end up in Australia in the 1800s, but you can still make the same jokes.
Yeah, exactly. Because none of the jokes stem from the fact that Duckula is a vegetarian vampire.
Yeah,
And
they
it's
stem
more
from
of the
where
jokes.
he is and when he is.
I mean, I've watched 5 or 6 episodes. I can't remember exactly how many. Some from the early seasons, some from the late seasons.
Yeah,
But only one gag that I found in all of the episodes that I watched. There was only one gag that even referred to the fact that he's a vegetarian vampire. There's one where they're in a time traveling roller coaster
yeah,
and they go to the future and there are sentient vegetables. And Duckula's trying very hard not to say the word vegetarian, whilst Igor is trying very hard to convince them that he's a blood-sucking vampire.
yeah,
That's fine. That's what we need. That's
yeah,
it. Just that once per episode, even
yeah,
would be fine. But that's the kind of the humor doesn't come from the characters, and that's the problem. I think the humor
yeah,
needs to be apart from again, and it's probably why she's my favorite character. The humor that comes out of Nanny it's intrinsic to that character. She is a great big dumb chicken,
yeah,
and all of her jokes revolve around the fact that she is a great big dumb chicken with a tiny little bird brain,
yeah,
and that's who she is as a character, and that's where her jokes come from. That's why she gets her words all mixed wrong, and yeah,
yeah.
that's why she's got that stereotypical West Country accent, and that's why she just smashes through the wall instead of the door. And
And do we ever
you know,
find out why her arm's always in a sling, or
no,
why her beak's always busted?
no, but I love that about her as well.
Yeah,
That's
it's
absolutely
again, it's the sort of thing that there's character there. There's a choice has been made there.
yeah.
So lead into it. Tell us, no, give us something to allude as to what the fuck is going on with it, where it's come from.
Make a running gag out of it if you want. Yeah, but I'm sort of fine with the fact that we never find out. It's just again, it's down to a character that she is so clumsy. She's always crashing through walls and she's quite boisterous. So it would make sense that she's got these things. It also adds to the look of the character. And of course, the sling is like Mary Poppins' handbag, isn't it? She's
Yeah,
constantly pulling things out of it. Oh, I've got one tucked up my sleeve, and she'll just pull whatever it is, whatever random fucking story object they need that week
yeah,
in order to get to the end. She just happens to have it up her fucking sling.
yeah,
So that's fine. I think she's a great character. When he works, so is Igor.
yeah,
But occasionally, like I said, he's a complete odds because should be a bad guy and he's not. But when he gets to just play straight man and he gets to be incredibly droll, he can be like actually quite nasty, and
yeah.
that's funny. That's funny in a kids show. He can be really dry, really sardonic, and that's all good. It's just Duckula's so fucking frenetic, and nothing comes from the fact that he's a vampire or a
Yeah.
fucking vegetarian. I just don't get it. I don't get what he is, and that's a problem when the show is called Count
I
Duckula.
was going to say, I think that's the problem with the show in general is that it doesn't know what it is and it doesn't know what it wants to put out.
No, no, yeah, you sort of almost you almost want it to be like Count Duckula is a good vegetarian vampire, and so we know there are other Duckulas out there in other countries in the world. So it almost has to be about him just going around and knocking on their door and being like, "Hey, have you heard about vegetarianism? Here's a pamphlet."
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, do you want
Can
to
I
come
tell
to
you about our Lord and
Bloodsuckers
Savior,
Anonymous?
Mr. Broccoli?
Exactly, yeah. Do you want to come to Bloodsuckers Anonymous with me next week? Do you know what I mean? It almost feels like he needs something to do.
Yeah.
You know, that doesn't make him any more likable as a character, but it makes him funnier.
And
Um,
it fits with what they've tried to build as a character as well.
yeah, and then you get that friction with Ego then, where he's like, you really shouldn't be doing this, because actually, like, he's trying to convert Duckula to the ways of evil and stuff,
Yeah.
but he's not particularly good or wholesome anyway. So
No.
I don't see why he needs to be made more evil. All Ego wants is for him to drink blood, but as you say, there's no
Yeah,
there's no
there's no
benefit
impetus
to
for
that.
that.
Yeah,
But
it's not
like
like he's
even Igor, like Igor's there, and his stated raison d'etre is to, as I say, to bring him back over to the foul side. Get him drinking, like turn into what he should be in the first place. But he, as much as Duckula doesn't really rebel against it, he doesn't push it either.
no.
You'll get, as I said, there's the odd line, the odd bit in every episode, but it's not pressed on. It's never impressed upon anybody that actually Igor has a purpose here above just being the manservant. There's nothing to him.
No, there's no friction between the two of them, and and again narratively it feels like that's what they want.
Yeah,
And it's not even like they should be afraid that that would get away in the way of the gags, because it didn't with Danger Mouse. You know, it's just,
Yeah.
Danger Mouse was put in danger every week. There was peril every week. He had a mission to complete every week, and it was still. I mean, I'd argue all day long Danger Mouse is funnier than this.
Yeah.
You know, and it's more random, if anything, as well. Like, some of the gags in Danger Mouse are fucking Python-esque. They're mental. They make no sense whatsoever. You know, whereas at least these, they put like I said, they put the work in with the wordplay. It's just that it just doesn't go anywhere. And so as an adult watching it, it just leaves me sort of looking at it going, what the fuck is this? What am I watching? As a kid, it was enough that, you know, the animation is really good. It looks great.
Yeah.
And like I said, it played, like, the fact that it was all gothic looking and we had a dark palette and he's dressed up like a stereotypical vampire, like, it was hitting all of the right notes for me.
Yeah.
So I loved looking at it, I think, is why I kept coming back to it as a kid. And I'm still kind of enamored, provided he doesn't speak or move. I'm enamored with what the character of Duckula could be, you know. So I like that idea. You know, I mean, if you follow this through to a slightly natural progression, now, if you look at the type of thing that we get in things like What We Do in the Shadows now, where like, yeah, okay, they're not vegetarians, but when you're sort of looking at humanizing vampires in that way and maybe not making them just these horrendous blood-sucking fiends, you know, there was all of that could have been garnered from this.
Yeah.
It just isn't. And so it leaves me weirdly cold. And it really shouldn't. It's a shame, because like I say, the funny is very, very funny. For the most part, the voice cast are really good as well. David Jason aside, I'm sorry, I know he's like fucking national treasure or something, and generally I'd be saying he's brilliant in Danger Mouse, he's brilliant in Wind in the Willows. Fools and Horses goes without saying, but he just fucking sucks in this. He's fucking, that accent is horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous. Like you say, even the choices, the little nervous laugh. It's almost. Do you know what it felt like to me? Like I say, he kind of tries to go New York with it, and it's almost like he just come out of a Woody Allen marathon, and he's just been like, I'm gonna make a vegetarian. He's a vegetarian vampire duck, so I'll make him like Woody Allen. But it's like, well, okay, that
he's
that
going to
might
be all
work
neurotic, and he's going to be all he's going to be all conflicted and.
Yes, and that would work, but that isn't the character that's written then, because the character that's written wants to be a fucking rock star and is super confident and arrogant and ordering people around. And again, it's like, this is at odds. It's like all of these people have come together and there's been no singular creative voice that goes, this is who these characters are, these are the stories we're telling, this is how we're creating. There's no direction. Nobody's picked this up and gone, actually, no, David Jason, he's not Woody Allen. He's fucking Tom Cruise or Keanu Reeves or whoever else, but he needs to be cool, not neurotic.
Yeah.
So make him cool.
Yeah,
you know.
That's it.
Or if you want to make him neurotic, then you need to go to the writing team and go, right, we need to play on this more. He needs to be having a crisis of confidence, because he's not a vampire like all of the ones that have gone before him, and he never will be. And you know, that's a show in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
Of like,
that's what this should be. That's what this should. No, that's how. When this first came out and it was marketed, it was, he's a vegetarian vampire. That's funny, people.
Yeah.
That's how this was set up, and then all of a sudden you just don't get that. I mean, it's interesting. You made the Woody Allen comparison, because when I was watching the one I was watching yesterday, I was thinking it reminded me of Big Mouth with the Andrew character, who is that very stereotypical Jewish teenage neurotic character, and that's what I was thinking there. Is actually, this character should have some of that. Yes, okay, not with the same content, but there should be this huge element of self-doubt that, well, why am I not like all the other ducks?
Yeah.
Or the other vampire ducks? Why? No, they all drank blood, and they're all. No, why am I different? Okay, you're different because they fucked up the ritual, and Nanny gave you ketchup instead of blood. Okay, fine, but what does that mean? Where can I go with that?
What is my place in the world? And again, then that leads you into like everything else in the show clicks into place. He then goes around the world talking to all of the other vampire Duckulas to find out what's different about him. Ego leads him on that quest, because Ego's now trying to help him rather than being a villain. He's like,
he wants to help him become the vampire he's supposed to be.
They're on the same page. Yeah, he's basically his hormone monster, to use the Big Mouth analysis. Yeah, they're on the same page. He's like, no, you could do this. Just go and speak to, Angus Duckula or whatever he was called up in Scotland, and he'll tell you how he like killed the Loch Ness monsters and drank their blood, or whatever it's going to be, And there's a show there, and you can have the rest of the show can run exactly as it does. You can have all the same gags, we can do all the same things, you can have all of the horrendous stereotypical accents.
Yeah.
But the framing device clicks into place much, much better.
No, it's interesting because I've got a list of the episodes here, and the last one in the first season, episode 26, called A Family Reunion. And the blurb on it, now this is a blurb on Wiki, so I'm not sure how accurate it is, but this kind of gives you a sense of the episode. Duckula has chosen to host a family reunion on Halloween, but he's not too keen on the idea, as he knows his relatives will kill him if they discover he no longer drinks blood, and he despises being a vampire, so he decides to fake it.
There you go. There's your show in a nutshell. There's your premise right there. Why have we not got, every episode like that? Because that's much, much funnier than what we get. It holds together much better. And all of the characters make more sense. Then, Nanny being overprotective makes more sense.
Yeah.
The whole
Igor
Ducky
trying to turn
thing.
him because he knows he's in danger.
Yeah. And, Van Goosewing trying to kill him because he could become a proper vampire. It all makes so much more sense if you just commit to the central premise.
Yeah.
And they don't.
I think the fact that that's the last episode of the first season. Now, the first season is 26 episodes. That's half of your run. I mean, it runs for 65 episodes. Your first season is most of that.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you're thinking, right, okay, well, hang on. They've done nothing about from what I've seen, they never even allude to that in the 25 episodes that precede it.
Like I said, I've seen one gag based around the fact that he is a vegetarian vampire and not a real vampire, and that's it. One gag, and again, you want to go into the gothic horror of it all as well. If we, that leads you into the examination of, well, what is a monster? What is monstrous? And if he's different to all the others, is he still a monster in that case then? Because they're normal and he's not. So the fact that he's vegetarian makes him a monster.
And then the fact you've got Van Goosewing chasing him as well, because at some point, there is an element of trying to convince him that he's not a blood-sucking monster like the rest of them. So does Van Goosewing still need to chase him?
Yeah.
Well, yes, because he doesn't believe him, and he could be like the others. So you've got you bring so much more story into that, and you can still do as you said, you can still do your world tour and all the rest of it. But at least now it means something, and there's a reason for it, whereby we, along with the character, learn something from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can still have your stupid jokes along the way. And I'm not taking away from the stupid jokes, because I'm a big fan of those. But it's just, it would make a lot more sense for the character.
Yeah,
if they'd done this work early.
Yeah, definitely. And I just don't understand why it's not there. As I say, it's a clear choice. It's not like they try to do it and don't follow it through. They just don't. No. They flat out don't do it. So it's not the show that they want to make.
Yeah, you go into sort of the next season, and it's kind of like they forget about that, and they start back to the one-offs and the one-off stories and the hijinks and the shenanigans. And you think, well, hang on, if you're going to do that, don't tease us with that and then leave off again.
Yeah, exactly. It's just weird. I don't understand it. And I was really hoping in rewatching it now, because I have seen it once or twice since I was a kid, because as I say, it's on that DVD. But they were just like a selection of episodes, and I was like, well, I'm watching them out of context. And so they've always left me cold as well. But even going back and watching, as much as I have now, I was really hoping that I could piece this together, and that as an adult, like, the humor at least would be enough to carry me through, and maybe I wasn't getting it as a kid because the humor was too sophisticated. And some of it is. Like, for every slapstick nanny running through a wall, there is a really well constructed gag that's going to fly over the head of most children. But I'm left feeling, if anything, even more confused about it than I was as a kid. It's a really, really strange fish of a show, this one. And I can't say I dislike it at all, because I don't. There's something, like I said, there's something about that character that, even as much as I know he's an absolute prick when you watch it, there's something about that character that is quite endearing to me. And maybe that's because I love vampires and monsters, and maybe that's because they've got the look right, and because the word that the name in itself is a good gag. So I don't know, but it's such a strange one. It's such a strange one, and I feel like all it needs is that missing piece of the puzzle. It just needs to be like, if they were to reboot it now and do that, I would be 100% on board, 100%. Or if they were to reboot it and go completely the other way and go down a kind of Groovy Ghoulies route with it almost, and just make it like a bunch of gags, and he just happens to be a fucking vampire and whatever. Like, fine. fine, just make it a bunch of gags. I'm sure I can remember as well. This is another one of those things that may be lost in the fog of my brain, just like the Michael Jackson thing. But I'm sure I remember for a brief period this being a comic strip as well. I don't mean a comic book. I mean a strip, like in a newspaper.
I don't remember it being a
four
comic.
or five panel strip.
It may well have been. I don't remember that. I know it was a comic book. Because Star picked it up, didn't they, in the US? So I mean, I know it was a comic. I can see it as being a strip, and I also remember
sure.
it's. I mean, I'm sure you're right. It would lend itself to it. I can see it, but whether that's just me now imagining it because you said it, I'm not sure. But I also remember having like storybooks of this. Of episodes and shit like that. I mean, there was
books on tape and all sorts. It was huge.
It was 2 books. There was the No Sax, Please We're Egyptian episode and the Restoration Comedy episode, which was very early from season 1 as well. So they did those two, but those are the only ones they did. Restoration Comedy is he brings an interior designer to redecorate the castle, and basically Van Goosewing is there fucking things up. So they did those two as audiobooks. But yeah, I mean, there was loads of spin-offs, loads of merchandise. I mean, in terms of VHS releases, there were, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, about 25 different VHS releases. Not all solely Duckula, but some were on compilations. But 25 VHS releases with episodes on. And even though there's there were specials like Count Duckula, the Great Detective, and Count Duckula, Bombay Duck. They went out, and there's so much of this stuff. You think, well, fuck, now this must have done really well
I can only imagine Bombay Duck.
Yeah, I mean, that's
just the title is making me cringe.
Well, let's put it this way: if they've now recast Apu because Hank Azaria thought that was offensive.
Yeah, Bombay Duck. Oh Jesus! I mean, it's funny you saying that about specials.
Unless he's playing Gordon Bombay.
Maybe it's like a Well, why isn't why isn't the Mighty Ducks on our list? Do you remember the Mighty Ducks cartoon as well, where they were actual ducks? Why isn't that on our list? That needs to.
I don't know.
That needs to go on the list. Yeah, you've sent me down a whole nother nostalgia trip now about Mighty Ducks. Ducks in general.
Dr. Bombay had we talked about fucking Bewitched all night.
Yeah, Ducks in general, as far as animation goes, have a pretty good track record with me. Like the point where I think, and again, I don't want to be harsh to this show. I think this might be the worst duck-related show that I can think of, because generally, duck shows pretty fucking good. Having said that, we haven't rewatched Mighty Ducks yet. That might suck donkey balls. So let's see. But you mentioned specials again, because this show was like, it was everywhere. There was merch everywhere for Duckula. And like I said, this was around when I was sort of 7 to 10 ish. And so, I had a lot of that merch, and this was quite big and informative part of my childhood. And so I do have a lot of these kind of, do I remember that, or am I misremembering kind of things like the Michael Jackson thing at school, like the comic strip? But another thing I seem to remember there being, and particularly at this time of year, for some reason, I have a really strong association between Halloween and Duckula as well. And I swear there was a Halloween special at some point as well. And that's where that's come from. Because if not, they certainly showed a lot of it at Halloween and made it like a thing. But I swear blind, there was a Halloween special of Duckula that was played, like just like you would have a Christmas special that was played every fucking year,
I mean, there were, they had 4 seasons, so I mean, I'd imagine they did throw in, they would have thrown in, they had a Christmas episode, there's a Christmas Quacker.
Okay.
So I mean, you had that. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a Halloween one.
I'm almost certain.
Can't find it. There probably was. I'll have to have another look. Oh, hang on. What was that? No, that was a different one. Yeah, so I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at all if there were Halloween ones. I mean, they all kind of had like a Halloweeny theme anyway. There were lots where they used other monsters. They used the mummy pharaoh. They used the mummies. You've got one where there's a Frankenstein-esque, Frankenstein monster-esque creation. They'll have they'll have so many. Oh, there you go. The Return of the Curse of the Secret of the Mummy's Tomb meets Frank Duckula's Monster and the Wolfman and Intergalactic Cabbage. What a fucking episode title.
But that is the type of shit I want from this show. Like, if that episode lives up to that title, that's the kind of show we want, isn't it? Like, he's a vampire, so he's in a world with all of these other monsters.
Yeah, exactly. I'll read the blurb for that episode. I've not seen that one. I've just spotted it on the page. I'm going to try and find that one later. Duckula is chased by an alien cabbage, a werewolf, a mummy, Frankenstein's monster, a Van Goosewing, and some angry villagers. Just an average day.
More of that, please.
Perfect.
Yeah, more of that, please,
perfect.
rather than I'm going to fuck off to Egypt to find a magic saxophone, because that seems like a thing a vampire would do.
Well, yeah, and there's loads of episodes where they go in search of missing treasure and stuff. It's like, no, that's not what vampires do. That's not what you expect a vampire to be doing.
Yeah,
and if that, no, I said that's clearly a choice they've made, but it's just at odds with everything you kind of expect.
Yeah, it's a weird choice. This show is just full of weird choices. But as I say, I'm trying not to be harsh. I do feel like we've been quite negative towards it, and I'm trying every way I can to avoid that, because I know people love this show, and I get why. This isn't one of those things where I'm looking at it going, you're all wrong, you fucking idiots. Like, I get it. I do. I get it. I just can't help but see all of these weird little quirks that I think it doesn't click with me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have the same issue. I mean, I came into this remembering it very fondly, not remembering so much of the content, it turns out, but certain bits that have resonated, talking about I'll get it and stuff like that. All of them, there's so many bits of this which have stayed with me for the last 30 plus years. And that's fine. I'm okay with that. And I watched a handful of episodes, and while I was frustrated, I still enjoyed them. I was still thinking, okay, they're a bit long, but actually I'm not here thinking, well, this is a fucking waste of time. What are we going to talk about for an hour and a half tomorrow? It wasn't like that. It wasn't that. It's not that type of show. We've had those types of shows before.
Oh, definitely.
So I'm a bit mixed with this one. Is that I loved it as a kid. I wasn't as impressed this time around, but I still found enough in it to keep me going to get me through it. So it's a bit of a strange one, really.
Yeah, I'm very mixed on it. As I say, but I always have been. I don't think my opinions changed at all, which I find very strange, because I thought I was actually going to like it more as an adult. But I've always felt that way about it. It's always, I had the merch. I liked the character. I watched the show. It's not like I didn't like it. And the same now. I've stuck with it. I've watched these episodes. I probably wouldn't. Well, no, I definitely wouldn't turn it off if I found it on TV. I probably wouldn't put it past me to watch one or two more on YouTube. Now I know they're all on there, because, for what it's worth, when those gags hit the mark, they are really, really funny, and I still like the aesthetic of it, and I love that whole gothic horror Transylvanian vibe of it. It's just that I don't know what it is. It's not what I want from it, and because of that, it really leaves me a little bit out in the cold. It's strange.
Yeah, that's fair.
I feel so strange about this show. I really, really do. I don't think I'll ever dislike it, and I think I will always come down on the side of defending it. Were somebody to start attacking it, and be more aggressive towards it than we've just been, I think I've got enough in me to be able to turn around and go, well, no, but okay, so he isn't as much of a vegetarian vampire duck as we'd like him to be, but look how good the writing is, look how funny those gags are, look how good the animation is. I've got enough in me to argue that, but I haven't got enough in me to champion it, to go out and say, that's one of the best shows ever. Got it. Like, I'll always be able to say, yes, that was a big part of my childhood, and yes, I fondly remember it, even if it is a case of the show was a bit weird. I still fondly remember my Duckula duvet and, things like that, and like I said, the associations with Halloween and the discussions we'd have in the playground, and the Spectrum game, which was one of the few I could actually complete. Well, I feel like the characters almost transcended the show is what it is. I think, like, if you said to me about Duckula, I can instantly see the character and instantly get all the memories from it. But if I actually sit down and watch the show, I'm going to go, but he's such a cunt, though. Like, he's so dislikable. Like,
We almost broke a
Unlikable, not
record.
dislikable.
We almost got through a whole episode without using that word.
Is that the first time we've said cunt
Yeah,
this episode?
yeah,
Cunt, cunty, cunt, cunt, cunty, cunt, cunt, cunt. I'd hate to
yeah.
disappoint anybody. Um,
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that's probably the way. Probably the way I want to stick with it is that if I don't think about what's in each episode, if I just think about the character, if I just think about the show as a whole, I can kind of stay on board with it.
yeah,
But if I start looking at the fucking TARDIS castle
yeah,
and Victor and Hugo with other faces, and if you start looking at things that I think, yeah, it's a little bit more problematic than I'd like it to be. But yeah, I'm quite happy at this stage, just going, I'm going to ignore all that shit and just go, you know what? Yeah, it's Count Duckula. I loved it when I was a kid. I've not watched a great deal of it since, and in a couple of years' time, I'll have forgotten all this anyway.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's kind of where I am with it.
Yeah, I would agree. I will always fondly remember it. I will always have an association with the character. I just can't, and I know most people are probably expecting us to have just spunked all over it for the last hour, and I just can't. Because I don't think it's exceptional. I think it's very, very funny. I think it's good. I don't even think it's very good. It's certainly nowhere near the level of its stablemates. It's nowhere near Danger Mouse or Wind in the Willows. And I haven't
No,
watched Wind in the Willows for a very, very long time. So maybe
no, I
we'll
was going
find
to
that
say,
that's awful as well. But I
yeah,
have watched Danger Mouse a lot, even as an
yeah.
adult. And it is not even fit to be mentioned in the same fucking sentence,
No, and I
in
mean,
my opinion.
I've got to be honest. I remember more about Victor and Hugo, which didn't run for that long. I
I
remember
hated
more
Victor and
about that.
Hugo. I really disliked that show.
I didn't hate it. And it was one of those. It was on, so I'd watch it because we only had 4 channels. One of them was in Welsh, so fuck that noise. So
You
and it
mean
was
you didn't watch Will Quack Quack?
no.
Well, what? Right. Okay, that's going on the list now to make you watch
I,
Will
I'm-
Quack.
I've seen it since, but at the time I was just like, well, I no, I
You're
didn't
not
watch
you're
that
not
show.
missing anything. It was
No, no,
fucking shit,
it was
but it was a
terrible.
big part of growing up around here.
But yeah, so I mean, I remember Victor and Hugo, and I remember aspects of that a lot more clearly than I remembered Duckula. But I also remember it being really fucking bad. So I mean, maybe that one needs a rewatch to see if I've misremembered that the way I've misremembered this. I don't know. Maybe there was something in that actually we didn't pick up on at the time.
I think that's the one now that if we were to rewatch it, and it is on the list, I know it is. That's the one now that if we were to rewatch it, I reckon I'd end up loving, just because I fucking hated it as a kid,
Yeah.
and that tends to be the way these things go. All I can really remember about it was obviously that they were burglars, and I remember the theme tune because the
Yes.
theme tune was really, really catchy.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, that's another one possibly. But yeah, in terms of the Cosgrove Hall oeuvre, if you like,
Yeah.
I think I put this above Victor and Hugo, but below everything else. And look,
Yeah.
that is pretty esteemed company, to be fair as well.
Yeah.
Like Danger Mouse and Wind in the Willows are fucking exceptional shows.
Yes.
Like, well, maybe Wind in the Willows is, I don't know, we haven't rewatched it, but as a kid, I remember it being like the absolute nuts. Like
Yeah.
I loved the fucking thing. So
Yeah.
who
I mean,
knows?
it's quite funny actually, Wind in the Willows, because as a kid, I didn't like reading. I used to get bored very quickly, and I watched that, and I remember that we had the book, and I actually as soon as I finished watching it, I was like, right, I'm gonna fucking read that.
Yeah.
And that was the thing. I was like, oh right, okay, here we go. Whereas no, it's quite ironic. No, it's quite ironic the amount I read. Not so much now because I don't have time, but the amount I've read over the years, where you do just go, right, I've got half hour and pick up a book, and I know that all stems to Wind in the Willows, where it's like, oh, I've just watched that. Is that the same thing? I enjoyed it. I'll give it a look. And it's that got me into it. So I mean, that's another one. It's got a special place, but not for necessarily for the reason of what was on the screen, just because what it
Yeah.
did.
I mean, we'll save it for our inevitable Wind in the Willows podcast, but I cannot look at Wind in the Willows in any other format, not the original text, not even the Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, which I love dearly.
Yeah.
I can't watch any of them without comparing them to David Jason and Cosgrove Hall's Wind in the Willows. He is Mr. Toad to me.
Yeah.
Like even looking at an image of Mr. Toad from the Disney adaptation, like the voice I hear is David Jason. Like he is Mr. Toad, and all the other Wind in the Willows adaptations are judged by that one. So who knows? Maybe it's shit though. I've certainly seen Ichabod and Mr. Toad a lot more than I've seen that.
Yeah.
So it might be interesting to compare it to that now. But then again, Ichabod and Mr. Toad tells the story of winning the Willows in like half an hour, whereas they had a lot more than that. So who knows?
Yeah, who knows? We'll give it a look. We'll find out. Stay tuned for that one, listeners.
Yeah, sorry, this was the Duckula podcast, but that's tangentially related because it's all the same studio, and that was me just trying to express, I guess, how high expectations are as an adult looking at this show, because you know the quality of the output from the studio, and you add the nostalgia onto the top of that as well. So I totally understand how we've probably not delivered the podcast that listeners were maybe expecting about this one, because I'm sure most people will see the title and go, oh yes, I fucking love that. And what I would say to all of those people is actually, have you watched it recently?
Yeah.
Because if not,
there's
maybe
an official
don't.
YouTube channel. Yeah,
maybe don't. And it's not very often I say that, because you know, if you have any connection to it, go back and watch it. Maybe you'll still love it. But maybe it's also not what you remember. It's certainly what I remembered, but clearly wasn't quite what you remembered, Mark. So I don't know. We've fallen into that trap.
To it.
Yeah.
I remembered the opening and the closing without so much in the middle. So
I mean, we've fallen into that trap with a number of shows, and they have been ruined for us. Thankfully, that wasn't the case with this for me, because I got what I expected. And I don't think it's the case for you either, is it? Like, as much as it's not as good as you remember, it hasn't ruined it. But it's almost infamous on this podcast now. But see the raccoons, for instance, which has been ruined for life for us. Raggy Dolls, similar thing. So maybe think twice about whether you actually want to revisit this, is what we're saying. But look, it's out there on YouTube. It's going to cost you nothing, and it's an official channel. So someone that was involved with this somewhere is going to get some coin if you just flick it on. So have a look, I guess. And if you don't like it, just leave it play in the background. At least get those guys paid. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, I'd love to know what people think. As I said, I know a lot of people who loved the show at the time, and a lot of people who will think very fondly of it now. So I'd love to know if people have rewatched it, or people on the back of what we've said go back and rewatch it. I'd love to know what they think and what their opinions are.
And I would love to know if you know anything about Michael Jackson being in the end credits, or whether that was just me having a weird fever dream, or whether my schoolyard was just fucking weird.
Are the two mutually exclusive?
No. Probably not.
But yeah, so I mean, whatever your thoughts are, please get in touch. Let us know on Twitter at SMPDpod. You can go to our website, ddpodcast.net, where you can pick up our previous episodes and other shows as well. On Facebook and YouTube with the Double Down Podcast Network. Wherever you get your podcasts from, be it iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, Amazon Music. Like, share, subscribe. Please message the best we can. We get back to you. Just quickly from me, my favourite vegetarians in the hospital right now having surgery. So I just want to say get well to Petra, because she may die, and then at least I've done something nice. But yeah,
hopefully she doesn't come back as a vegetarian vampire, because as we've discovered, they're assholes. So yeah, good luck, Petra. Get well soon, but don't be a vegetarian vampire. Is my advice.
Yeah. But yeah, so no, hopefully she will, because she's one of our regular listeners. So if we lose her, we're down to like 2. So
unless she's a vegetarian vampires wouldn't sire anymore, would they? Yeah. So yeah, don't want to lose her. Okay.
Yeah. So so get well soon.
Thoughts and prayers and all that.
Yeah. But until next time.
Good night out there, whatever you are.